Welcome everyone to today's webinar, AI Insights and Micro Coaching, the key to your successful M&A strategy. With guest speakers, Chris Terris, VP, Global Strategy and Animal Health of TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, and Opher Brayer, co-founder and chief scientist at Impro.AI. Before we begin, a couple of housekeeping items. The webinar will last 1 hour. We'll start with a dialogue with Chris and Opher and pop in a few polls along the way. And also, webinar participants are invited at any time to enter questions into the Q&A box, as well as to upvote any questions that they would like to see answered. And we'll get to as many questions as we can. Let's begin. Mergers and acquisitions are complex transactions that require considerable planning, due diligence, and execution for a successful outcome. With the increasing competition in the global markets, companies are constantly looking for new ways to optimize their M&A strategies and stay ahead of the curve. AI Insights and Micro Coaching provide a great opportunity for companies to leverage data-driven insights and develop personalized approaches that help them achieve their desired results. The goal of today's webinar is to dig into these topics and more with our two guests, Chris Terris and Opher Brayer. Chris, please introduce yourself and tell us why you are uniquely positioned to share this topic.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I'm happy to do that. So a little bit about maybe who I am and a little bit about who TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods is as an organization. So Chris Terris, I've been at TELUS for 22 years, so I have a real deep background in telecom. And one of the things that TELUS as an organization, which if you're not familiar with it, it's predominantly a Canadian telco, but we've diversified our business into other lines of business like TELUS International and TELUS Health and TELUS Agriculture, because we have a tendency to apply our talent and people in areas where it aligns with the social purpose and social capitalism thesis of the organization. We started a business unit in 2019 called TELUS Agriculture. And that's what we had called ourselves at that point in time. And I was probably employee number 2. And one of the roles that I had at that time was working on building out the strategy, which was largely acquisition based. So, we've grown that business from where we were in 2019 through the acquisition of 13 different companies across the value chain in agriculture and now consumer goods. And my role's been really sort of twofold. One, working with the TELUS organization and the TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods organization and building out that strategy, identifying companies that we think fit our business strategy, but also working through the business cases and post-acquisition integration plans associated with that. So I think from my perspective, it's an interesting journey to be on, trying to build a business through acquisition and integrate across a number of different countries and organizations and cultures. And the other part of that I have is I lead actually a part of that business called animal health. So I've got a portion of actually operating the business, which actually kind of positions me to see it from that side as well. So a lot of experience over the last few years, and probably some challenges that I can talk to in terms of trying to do something like that from a integration and acquisition standpoint.
Fantastic. Would love to hear more about that. Opher, over to you. Please introduce yourself and let us know about your passion around data-driven insights in the M&A space.
It all starts with me working as a consultant, coach, and trainer for many years for companies from Silicon Valley, Israel, Germany, Singapore. And I found that I'm usually using my experience and intuition. And the world has grown, and I've started to see something being called data analytics and databases and stuff like that. And I started to learn everything about it, just to see is it useful. So when we built the company, Josh, Maya, and I, the first thing I noticed that my intuition is okay. My experience is my experience. But there are so many, coaches and trainers and managers and VPs and other with so much experience that I would never have. So my experience, was basically biasing me with my decisions. Since I was quite highly creative, innovative person. I thought that's okay, I can get out of it. But the moment I saw the competition in the world and so many mergers and acquisitions and competition and partnerships, and I saw many failures over the years, said that's not good enough. The brilliancy of one consultant, coach, trainer is not good enough. The experience is not good enough. The talent is not good enough. It was not good enough. I need to take all the brains in the world, and to put everything into one place. So when we'll make a decision as managers or as consultants, it will be a decision that is based on data. And that was my life work in the past couple of years, just searching how to utilize smart data, emotional data, physical data, in order to create solutions that really can last. That's how I got to what I do today, and I found these great partners, Maya and Josh from TELUS, right? Chris, you know him, and since then we became a family, and we got Yuli, and we got so many, like 25 people in the company today, that amazing people working towards helping companies to prosper and to minimize risks in the end, because there are so many internal risks. Risks are not only like, from external, like cyber risk or economical risk or competitive risk. There are so many risks inside the company, especially in the world of mergers and acquisitions. And I think you know that, Chris, better than I do.
Well, certainly my recent experience would led me to believe that I have some knowledge of that. Yes, from a risk standpoint, absolutely.
Yeah. But imagine that we take your knowledge, we take the knowledge of like another 200,000 people like you, and we mix them right, and we find the right solutions. It's an extension of your own brain, basically. That's how I see technology, right? So that's it. That's where we are today.
Well, thank you both, and thanks for setting the table for a great dialogue. Let's just pause for a second and pop up a poll, and let's see who's in the room. I've got a quick question, and the question is, has your company recently completed and/or is planning a merger or an acquisition in 2023? So if folks in the audience could take a moment and answer the poll, that would be really helpful, so we can see who we're talking with today. The poll is live, and we'll give that a minute. But while we're waiting for people to signal, and we'll see the results in a minute, I'd love to turn it back to you, Chris. So in your experience, when it comes to planning and executing an M&A strategy, how important has data been to the success or failure of M&A? And traditionally, where or how have you sourced your information?
Yeah, it's a great question, Lee. I think when you think about what we've been trying to accomplish in TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, it's about building a business of consequence for TELUS and for our shareholders, and meeting a customer need. So when you start in M&A, you're obviously looking a lot at data around financials, market opportunities, product, technology. Certainly want to have a good sense of the attributes of the company that you're trying to acquire, and really importantly, how it fits with the strategy of how you feel you can differentiate yourselves in the business and industry that you're trying to support. So like data is clear and obvious, I think, on a lot of those elements, and that substantiates a business case and a post-acquisition integration plan that's got a series of financial outcomes and people outcomes and product outcomes once you've done that. And that's all built on data that I think a lot of us on the webinar today probably have insight and access to. One of the challenges that you have, and Opher talked a little bit about this, is it's pretty easy to assume based on your gut and experience what's happening once you've actually completed an acquisition. But it's harder to substantiate it from a people perspective in terms of really getting the insights into how the business is performing and how that's manifesting itself in the team. I mean, I think it's key when you jump into integration. You have to really diagnose how the work gets done. You've got to set priorities, and then you've got to kind of hardwire those priorities and support the change in the business. And you can see a lot of those things at a macro level, and you can feel them, but that's largely enumerative. So you're looking at it on a monthly basis, or in the context of outcome numbers and whatnot that are happening in terms of how the business is performing financially and otherwise. Really getting to that kind of depth of employee behavior, cultural alignment, and things like that. That's one of the challenges that you definitely see from a data perspective when you're going through M&A. I mean, we all measure the outcomes. We're all looking at the business cases. We're certainly trying to understand our market position and how that performs. And those become the obvious things that are important from an M&A standpoint tied to strategy. There's another layer below that that I think is a challenge to get into from a people perspective.
It's a huge challenge. Let me say something, Chris. We in our company, we've done only 100,000 coaching sessions this year. You say only? I mean, as a coach, I never done 100,000 when I was a coach, an executive coach. It's only, I'm telling you, we need millions of them in order to really understand what's happening. But let me get into the point of the human parts in what you do. I read just in a book the research that says that there are 52,000 decision data points through the day that one person has. Of course, most of them are kind of automated behaviors and so on. But let's make an assumption that 10,000 of them are work-related during the day. 10,000 of them, or even 1,000, but 10,000 and if you have 1,000 employees, let's say, just for the sake of, it means 10 million decision points per day in a company. Did you know that sometimes one person can make one mistake out of those 10 million decisions per day that will impact systemically over time to make a company to fail? Because it's cause and effect loops. These are cause and effect loops. So basically, one little mistake that one people, it's like a virus. It's just a tiny virus. You don't see the virus at all. And suddenly you have, 300,000 people in Italy dying from COVID, right? So how does it happen that, that those are small, tiny? What about if you have 1,000 small mistakes in the company per day that aggregates into a failure over time? And I think this is where it comes to the human part of not technology part, not anything else. The human side of failure, is so big that I believe that as a CEO, you don't know all the data. You know what everybody's doing at every minute. There's no chance that you will know. You don't even have a sample of 1% of what they do. Because 1,000 employees, and there's a layer of report. So in the end, what you know is maybe 1% of what's happening, because you don't, and so you don't have a control system. So one of your employees out there will create something that over time will grow into a failure of an acquisition, and that's the problem. And that's what we're trying to figure out. How to take all this data of every data point, of every decision making, of every action inside the organization every day, in order to support the organization not to fail, and to support each person not to fail.
Yeah, you know what, Opher, I totally agree with that, and I think the challenge is getting to a depth of understanding in terms of the people at a more granular level, what those decisions are and how they're making them and how it aligns with what you're trying to accomplish. When you go into post-acquisition integration plan and you start executing on it and you've got failure, it's not always easy to see where that failure is or why. So your point on the decisions that are made and how they're made and what the outcomes prospectively could be is not lost on me, for sure. It's one of the challenges that you have when you're bringing together a number of different companies to build a business, for sure.
Yeah, I think we have one sample that I just talked to you before we started. A $20 billion acquisition, $28 billion acquisition. When Mark Benioff bought Slack. In the end, today we know that it's not successful, and the reason is no trust. It's one little thing, just trust. Hey, where's the technology? Where are the clients? Where's everything else? Why does a merger of, an acquisition of $28 billion can fail
Yeah.
with two giants. Like Salesforce is a giant, okay? It's a giant, it's a system, it's one of the best companies in the world, and they can fail in such an acquisition just because of one word: trust. It's not technology issues.
I love that we're talking about people and culture. And Chris, bringing 13 cultures together, could you talk more about that and some of the biggest challenges you faced?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting what we've gone through within TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, and there's been some learnings and there's been some real successes. You know, to your point, Lee, we've acquired around 13 companies starting in 2019 through 2020, 2021. We haven't done any acquisitions this year. But if you look at the composition of the companies that we've acquired, you know, you've got a lot that are in agriculture, supporting, you know, agribusiness companies and ag retail companies, and then we've got some that are focused on actual primary production of what farmers and, you know, other producers do. So they've got a different spot in the value chain. And then companies that are on the other end of the value chain from a food system standpoint in consumer goods. So you've got this dynamic of people that have different customer sets, different sizes and scales of companies that we brought together. And we're global in nature. So, you know, TELUS is a Canadian telco. We have a ton of experience in international work with TELUS International and the wonderful business that's been built there. But you start to mix together the notion of different ways of doing work, different customers, customer approaches. You've got challenges from different national cultures that you've got to think about. You know, we've got Americans and Canadians and, you know, the British and Armenians and, you know, people from all around the world that are part of the business, all have sort of different levels of engagement. And, you know, it's interesting to me, and this is a McKinsey stat that I'm sure a lot of people have read, that, you know, 95% of executives describe cultural fit as critical to the success of integration. And then, you know, 25% cite lack of cultural cohesion, alignment as the primary reason that integration efforts fail. And maybe Opher, to your point, you know, that's what's happened with Slack as an example. So when you think about that, you've got this really interesting mosaic of cultures and people and businesses and things like that. So a couple of the challenges are, you know, really trying to ground on a set of attributes that, you know, fit the organization from a cultural standpoint, and make sure that you're consistently representing, you know, the culture of what you want or aspire to be prospectively, and, you know, the cultures that you have in the business today. The second part is, you know, really understanding how the work is getting done today and getting insight into that, and understanding how people are working together, because I don't think you can change what you can't see. So we've really had to focus on understanding through due diligence before we do the acquisition, the nature of the leaders that we have and how the company works, being very transparent in terms of how we see that company fitting within the business that we're trying to build within TELUS Agriculture. And then, you know, ultimately being able to establish the manner in which we plan to work together and work as a business as we kind of integrate these businesses and cultures. I'll just give you an example of how this is really important from a feedback standpoint. Our strategy evolved from being very agriculture focused. In fact, when we launched in 2020, we called ourselves TELUS Agriculture. We did a number of acquisitions on the consumer goods side of our business, which are, you know, wonderful people, wonderful technologies, amazing companies and customers. But you have a group of people that you've brought into a business that don't see themselves in it because you've called it something like agriculture. And we had to take that feedback from across the business and feedback from our customers and the evolution of our strategy. And we went through a rebrand earlier this year that we think is highly representative of, you know, the customers we serve and hopefully our team members, well, not hopefully, but I know they see themselves in that business now, which is part of evolving the culture based on feedback. And we did that at a macro level, but there's multiple levels to managing that really becomes a consideration when you're trying to bring, you know, so many different companies and groups and ways of working together. Hopefully that gives a little bit of a flavor of the challenges that we've had and some of the things that we've done.
Amazing. Can I go to one of the statements that you have said? You know, because I come from another point of view of the world. You cannot change what you cannot see. This is a statement that I've heard from you 2 minutes ago. So let's talk about what we see. Okay, we talked about the CEO that knows 1% of what's happening, right? So there are basically, through data and through daily coaching of people and through going through everything, you know, that's happening in the company, basically, you can say that there are different levels of perspectives. So what do I know, let's say, about Slack and Salesforce? I know on the level perspective, I would say the generative one, the vision. I know the vision of that company, the vision of that. I don't know because I've never worked with them, so I don't know. So one level is to look at the vision of the company. The second level is to start to understand the mental models inside. So when you merge two companies, you have to bridge between different mental models. But that's already a reflective one. That's not generative one. If you go inside the company and you want to have a deeper level of understanding, you have to go to the systemic structure, the creative part. What's happening inside? How does it work? Who works with whom? You know, people, processes, everything else. Then you go to the adaptive part when you look at patterns. Can you see patterns? Do you know how they're going to lead the company to success or failure? And then when you go to the patterns, you have to go to the events, to the reactive element of every person, every day, at every hour, at every minute, right? So now everything has to do with perspective, okay? Or the level of perspective. So when you said you cannot change what you cannot see, it means that if you have a very high level perspective, you cannot see. As a CEO, you might not be able to see. As the board, the board of the company might not see. They don't know how every employee of 1,600 employees doing what, when, and where. And so this is where it comes. Decision-making in a highly competitive world needs to go to the pixel level of data to understand how they all mix together, what patterns are creating the future of the company, and to see, or let's call it the risk management of the HR, right, of the human resource. There's a lot of risks inside. So the more you can see those patterns and data, your decision will be made because you can see. And you will be able to make changes and optimizations that will help this company to cross the chasm between, I would say, desired future reality and current reality, to see all the gaps, to see the open issues, to see the questions, I mean, to take the action steps, to indicate the progress, to see the timelines, everything that goes inside the system. It's a part of your understanding the system and the data, which is crucial not for the CEO or for the executive team, it's crucial for every team leader to really understand what's happening inside the organization. Am I correct?
Agreed. Yeah, I believe you are. I mean, I think it's interesting to me, like, I'm sure every company does this. You do surveys and you ask your team and you try and understand or substantiate, you know, certain hypotheses that you may have in terms of how the business is performing, right? And how people feel about the business that they work in and, you know, the people that they work with. And those end up being somewhat enumerative, like they're happening at a point in time. And you're looking at it at a point in time, and then you're testing it again. And you know, we do that. Everyone does that. I think maybe Opher, like to your point, there's a layer below that becomes really important around the behaviors that drive, you know, that outcome from a survey perspective or otherwise that are hard to look at. I mean, certainly the work that we're doing with Impro today, I think is helping us get to that level that, you know, perhaps we wouldn't have been able to in the past by really getting down to your point, the pixel point on, you know, how people are working and how they're actually applying some of the cultural attributes that we're looking for in the business. And I think that's an important distinction between understanding, you know, on a broader level, how things are, how people perceive things and how they think about them and how the culture is performing, but then substantiating it at a more granular level is, I think, you know, one of the things that we're getting in terms of working with Impro.AI on some of this. So
it's quite interesting to see that you say we do a survey, but most companies do a survey every 3 months or 6 months, right? About the subject, but feelings about the company can change in 2 weeks. So it might be that a survey that was done 3 months ago, okay, is totally outdated. Or even a survey that has been done 3 weeks ago can be outdated. Survey must be done, let's say, every day in the company to aggregate the data and to see the trends. Because you look, if there is, let's say, a late delivery in an order for a client, there might be a systemic reason for this. Okay, and it might be in other departments. So how do you connect all the dots to understand on the pixel level what's happening, and how to create, to look at the occurrences of things, okay, and then make the micro changes that builds the big picture.
Agreed.
You know, it's like if you have a television with not too much pixels, it's very blurry, right? And you have a lot of pixels, you have K4, K8, K20, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's such a great metaphor, Opher. And we're going to actually pause for a poll because, Opher, you brought up the good point around, well, both of you did, around risks. We have approximately half of the audience who have either recently undergone M&A or believe that they might be in the next year or so. So this is timely. The next poll is about the people risks. So you talked about cyber risks, financial risks, and the like, but what about the people risk? So we have a question for the audience. Do you see people as an important part of your overall risk management strategy? We'd love to hear what people are thinking about that, to add in their voices to the conversation. But while we're waiting for those poll results, I have a question for you both. A big part of successful integration is change leadership, which is people, which is sometimes overcoming change resistance. What are the best approaches to these challenges? And then maybe specifically for you, Opher, how could data help with that?
Chris, you want to start?
No, you go ahead, Opher.
Look, change management is something that usually is being done every 2 years in companies. Realistically, change management should be done every month. Don't wait for 2 years to understand that you have to lay off 2,000 people. If you need to lay them off now, or train them so you will not have to get to lay them off, right? I think that one of the biggest problems when you make change, let's say in an organization, okay, you need to see it in a little different way. Let's say there is let's say a husband and a wife, okay, they were boyfriend and girlfriend. One day they got married, change of system a little bit, because now the parents are being involved a little bit, you know, on both sides. Now the baby comes. When the baby comes, there's a change of the system, right? It's a change of the system. And now grandma and grandpa will be even more involved on how to educate the little child, right? So now imagine that you take 1,000 people and you put them into a merger. One thing is saying, okay, let's merge a culture with a culture. But the culture has also individual cultures of every person. He has his own emotion. If you cannot touch every person to make the tweak of change, then it will fail. You cannot say, oh, this is a culture who is very oriented toward innovation, and this is a culture that's very oriented to work managing tasks. Okay? No, because each person has his own individual mental model. And you have to mix 1,000 mental models inside a larger mental model of an organization. So if you cannot touch each person and mentor each one of them and help them to change hundreds of habits per year, and I'm talking about hundreds of habits per year, because look, when you have a baby, suddenly your life is changing. First of all, you don't sleep at night. That's something new, okay? Now you have the baby crying 20 times a day. Give me that, give me that, give me that. I'm hungry, whatever. Okay, now things are changing. And suddenly you find yourself fighting with your wife or with your husband, right? Why? Because you disagree on the education. What is the future of education? Should we send them to school, not to school? A company is the same with 1,000 people, or 10,000 or 100,000. So on the surface, we do a merger. But we have to merge one person to another person. So they will communicate and build trust in between them. So the machine will be a machine of trust, and a machine of understanding, a machine of communication. Build that machine needs to go to each person by himself to build it, and not say, oh, we had some workshops, so we know, oh, the value system of the company. Yeah, we know. How do you know that they implement it? How they implement it? When they implement it? With vendors, with customers, daily, in life? What do they talk about you, outside of the company? This all needs to be managed in a highly competitive environment.
I agree. I think, look, at TELUS more broadly, we would say that we've got to have a consistent focus, a winning strategy, and we've got to be able to anticipate and adapt to evolving market conditions and whatnot. I think every company tries to do that. We would believe, at TELUS, and I would say TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, that our most sustainable and valuable differentiator for us is our culture. Culture is a
Yes.
competitive advantage. And to your point, on culture and change, you have to be able to manage change as part of a cultural imperative within the business, and see it to maintain that competitive advantage. And change is not to your point, it's not every 2 years. It's, not every 1 year. It's probably every month or every week. You have to adapt to changing conditions, either from a customer perspective or from a technology standpoint or otherwise. But you have to be able to see the effectiveness of that, right? And we see it in economic outcomes and financial outcomes. But certainly it's harder to see how it manifests itself in the engagement of the team. And I think that's an important distinction.
I do agree with you on one thing, that the culture in all the companies of TELUS that we know, because we work with some of them, okay, they're our customers, it's quite amazing. As a consultant, I've been working with more than 400 companies in the past. I've never seen such a culture, such a system, such a motivation. People don't want to leave the company. Like you say, great resignation. There's no great resignation in TELUS.
Yeah.
Never have been any. So there's something in TELUS that is remarkable. I'm telling you, because we work with many of you guys in different companies, and so we know it. But I would say one thing about change. When you talk about change, you need to change the organization, but you need to that each individual should change his own habits based on the new needs of the market, based on competition, based, whatever comes. The hardest part is to change habits. But in using data, we've been able to change 300 habits per year in some of our participants in companies. Most of them did only 100. Only? That's a lot to change 100 habits. But that was only. And the reason we have done it is because we wanted to take on the pixel level all the micro changes that will make a smooth machine. So when you change, let's say 1,000 people changing 100 habits per year, basically it's reskilling or creating new skills in huge numbers, because now we have 100,000 new skills that have been adopted into the system. And then the system become more adaptive because each individual is very adaptive, right? Each individual is very creative. The machine is very creative, okay? If each individual in the company is very productive, then the machine is very productive. So we cannot talk about things. We have to take action on the pixel level again and again. I will say it in order to cross that chasm.
Agreed. It's interesting. So I just want to bring it back to kind of the work that TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods is doing with Impro.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's been interesting for us. We've got an implementation in place. We've got a number of participants on it, and I think the measurable element that's unique, back to like, you got to get a higher degree of granularity. You got to be able to see at the pixel level. Yeah. Is working with Impro. Back to the very first question that Lee asked around the importance of data, you can actually you have a better view in substantiating people's perceptions about the organization, the challenges that we have, whether it's silos or multiple businesses, or maybe how we work together. but more importantly, how people are evolving to the habits and behaviors and effective leadership techniques that we're looking to embed and things like that. And to me, I think it's a bit unique in what Impro does today to kind of get to that level. And for us, it's been an interesting journey to kind of go on that with you guys to get to that level of data and insight that you didn't have. And to your earlier point, Opher, which I think is a great one. We make all kinds of decisions every day. How we make them is important. How we implement them and communicate them is equally important. The why we're doing it is important. And if you don't have a good sense of how people are working towards that, it can be very challenging. So that's what I think is kind of cool about what you guys are doing, is you can kind of get down to that behavior and habit level to get a better sense of the team members that are across the business of 13 companies that have been brought together and whatnot, and get a better degree of resolution on how the teams are working together, and substantiate maybe some gut experience that we have to your opening comment as well.
No, thank you, Chris. First of all, we love to work with the company, and we can tell you this. We started not long ago, and it works really well because I think you have excellent employees, excellent people. I will add one thing, that by tracking employees' behavior and optimizing them to make them highly successful, also the business can identify potential risks before they happen. It's like, when you go, let's say you walk in the street and you don't see the hole, you can fall to the hole. There's one hole, but this one hole, will make you break your legs, or even worse. But you need to see the hole. I think to take corrective actions and to avoid and minimize the impact of those holes, okay, you need a coaching system or internal coaching system, internal mentoring system, that every person in the company, every person is being coached every day on every subject, okay, and to correct negative employees' behavior, okay, and to reduce the chances, okay, of human error. I know a story from the past month here in Canada for a company. One person made one human error. And the company, Chris, I will not say it out loud, but and probably they've lost $500 million on that day. One person, one human error. If you can minimize it, okay, if you track the behaviors and you optimize the behaviors, you eliminate the possibility it will happen. You don't have to give the data to the CEO, hey, this guy does not know how to do X. No, you correct it. These corrective elements by coaching, mentoring systems, with every person in the system, you can minimize human errors, okay? And this impact profitability in the end, or a successful merger of acquisition. This is very important to understand. So you can protect yourself from potential risk and maximize the chances to success, because you make every person highly successful and minimizing his own personal risks.
Yeah, I agree. And just offer maybe we're going down this journey within TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, and we're doing an implementation and working with you. And my sort of traditional mindset is you kind of come into these things and you think about it as coaching and getting micro coaching for individuals. But I think maybe would be interesting for people to understand how at an aggregated level we can actually see in TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods how that is becoming effective. And just I think it kind of goes back to the power of your statement. I don't know if you have a thought on that.
Yeah. Well, I will tell you this. The way we work is we start with, let's say, 30 people in the organization who are, executives or, at some high level, in order to understand the system. Then when you're saying the leadership part, you go down and you take all the team leaders and start to optimize their behavior. Because what is a good leader? Okay. Somebody who knows one thing how to do well is managing processes and people. But then after a while, those managers become internal mentors using our platform, our technologies, in order to see all the data, in order to bring all the data inside. And then their team is performing on a higher level because each individual is being taken care of by the manager, who is also a mentor, who is using the extended abilities of our technologies, AI, algorithms, whatever we have in our system, in order to enable this to happen. And the more you optimize and you minimize the human errors, and you accelerate the speed of growth of each person, then we have a bigger picture also of the organization and how management can make decisions to support those people to be even more successful. It's a closed loop of growth, right?
Right.
That's how we do it. So we start with 30, then we go to, let's say, in your company, it probably will be like 200, and then the rest of them will be on the system. So each one of them will grow. Each one will become the best it can become, okay? We'll change 300 habits. And the system, we know exactly what's happening and how to invest your resources in the right groups of people in order to give better service to your clients and make good use of your vendors.
Yeah, I think, to one of the earlier points, like getting that type of insight is when you're going through bringing 13 companies together and a multitude of cultures and different ways of working, being able to have that visibility from an aggregated perspective, I think becomes a real differentiator on de-risking the opportunity for failure and improving the opportunity for success as you go through this. Because like I said earlier, we all know the financial outcomes that we're trying to drive and the business case outcomes. And, we have a aspiration on the culture and behaviors that we're trying to get to. And we survey like every company does, but being able to kind of get to the, to that level of granularity on behaviors and habits, I think is really, really key. So we're kind of interested to see how this journey goes for us, for sure.
Fantastic. So just to bring it back to the poll, because you are both talking about risk, and the majority of folks definitely do have people as important of their overall risk management strategy, but not all. And so that's very interesting when you think about that. It's now time to turn to some questions from the audience. We've had a couple of pre-submitted ones that I'll go to first, and then also would encourage anyone on the call to please go ahead and put your question in the Q&A for either Chris or Opher or both. So one of the pre-submitted questions that came in, Opher and Chris, was this: there is always the quote logical unquote reason to do things, and then there's the human side. Especially now, how do we retain the best and brightest while upskilling those who aren't quite ready for leadership roles?
That's a simple answer for me. It's not simple to implement, but I would say this: people don't leave companies. When people go in great resignation or leaving and don't like the company, it's usually because they don't like their leader. Because the leader is not implementing or not giving time to help me to grow as an employee. In this case, if Chris was my leader and Chris was sitting with me once a day, 1 minute, to mentor me and tell me, Opher, this is how you can become great. Micro steps, micro changes every day. And I would have changed 360 habits in 360 days because of Chris. Not for sure that if I will be offered another $10,000 per year in another company, that I will leave. I'd rather stay with Chris, because Chris will make me the next CEO of the world, or whatever it is. People don't leave, people invest in them. The point is, do you have the time to invest in them? Some people, like, let's say managers, they want to delegate, right? What do? Delegation. But do you train them before you delegate? No, you're making assumptions. Oh, he can make it. He can do it. No. Since you already know Chris how to do it, Chris, go teach him how to do it first. Make him ready emotionally, intellectually, technically, and then delegate. Then the moment you are investing in your people, by understanding the whole system as it works, then you will never lose those people. The point is that sometimes you lose the person not because he's leaving, you lose him while he's still staying. And these are the failure points of leadership. He's still there. He's working. He got a job. He needs the money. He doesn't want to find a new job. Okay, he cannot find a new job. So he's staying there. No motivation, no trust in you as a manager. You got the wrong employee, sir. So how do you know what's happening with him personally? How do you mentor him in the precise way of the real thing that he needs? If you can do this in 10 minutes a day to train 10 people every day, 1 minute per person, with a lot of support of technology, AI, whatever, modules, if you can do this, people will stay. And nevertheless, it will become a great team of people with unique talent propositions. And I think the investment in people is not just saying, let's invest. People do workshops. So what? How much people, when people go to workshops, how much they, you go as a manager, you tell to people and culture person, get me a workshop about leadership. Is it being implemented? Is it being measured? How it's being implemented? What is the quality of measurement? So you don't know. So it's a workshop. No, not a workshop. You need to mentor that person to understand the values of the companies, to understand the needs of the company, to understand the strategy of the company in order to do it. And you need to do it in 1 minute a day. Good luck to you. It's possible. I'm not saying it's not, but you need a lot of support to become a great leader. A company with great leaders will not lose their people. I can tell you this. I've seen it too many times.
Thank you, Opher. We have another question that I'd like to tee up for you, Chris. And it is this. Based on your experiences, what is the most important tip you would give to an executive who will go through an M&A in 2023?
That's a great question. I would probably look at it on two sides of it. So if you're the individual doing the acquiring, as we've been doing in TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, I think it's really important to set the stage on the strategy of the business, like where you're intending to go with the business, and be extremely transparent on the nature of where that company you're trying to acquire fits in that business. So what is it that you're looking for? What are you hoping the outcomes to be of the acquisition? How do you see the role of the leadership team? How do you see that company working within the construct of what you're trying to build from a broader business perspective? And it becomes really important because you don't want to bring someone in under the auspices of a certain set of expectations and then change them once they're in place, because that's a recipe for failure. And it goes back to Opher's great point on trust earlier. So I think transparency, maybe not through the trying to establish value and things like that on what the business case looks like, but you've got to kind of direction say, here's where we're going. And then once they're in the business, I think you got to be really clear on here's where we're trying to drive and what it looks like and why. I think if having gone through the experience of doing a number of acquisitions and trying to bring them in and working with my colleagues to bring them in, I think if I was someone that was being acquired, those are the questions that I'd probably ask as well. I was trying to get a really good sense of strategic fit, financial outcomes, the talent that exists in the organization that I have and how it's going to fit and how it'll be utilized. But I think that degree of transparency just really sets a good stage for being successful going forward. And I just wanted to make a comment, Lee, if I could, on the earlier question that Opher answered. I think, so and I'll just kind of give you my personal perspective. I work at a company in TELUS that is highly social purpose, social capitalism driven. Like, we believe that to do well in business, we have to do well in the communities in which we live and we work and we serve. I think that notion of the very transparent values of the company and the why the company exists, I think is a really key component of the human side. There's a lot of logic on, you can go build a fiber network or you can build a mobility network and you can, you've got rate versus volume and price and things like that. But how you actually apply that technology and how you utilize it and then how you give back to the communities that you're in, on the TELUS side of things, that's attractive to me. Like, that to me as an individual makes me want to work there. And I think companies being able to, it kind of goes back to the Simon Sinek TED Talk on why. I think being able to establish a really strong, coherent why, and being able to communicate that effectively, that to me kind of leans to the human side of why people are engaged in an organization. And I made the comment on culture as a competitive advantage. at TELUS, I think our dedication to social purpose, social capitalism, community involvement, I think that becomes a compelling element of, why people want to work here. And it attracts, in my mind, the right type of people to work at TELUS. So. I had to go back to that because I was thinking about it as Opher was answering it.
Yeah, let's talk about Simon Sinek for a second, not about him, about the why. We at Impro and we have looked and we're working with some mergers and acquisitions of different companies. And the risk of M&A are pretty well known. We know them. There's a list. I can give you the list of 400 risks,
Sure.
It's there. But at the same time, we need to give recognition to the opportunities that executives have, that can leverage during management, buyout, merger, acquisition, in order to build their career and the companies into something much bigger than they could ever have done alone. A merger, sometimes it's not only for survival. Some people do mergers for survival. But I think what you have done in merging 13 different companies or making acquisitions is in order to have a greater impact, besides of on humanity. I'm just business-wise. So if I was trying to figure out what are the rules, listening to you, to the why. So first of all, the why is to do something bigger than life, bigger than what we can do today as one company.
Sure.
There is a reason to merge two companies because the 1 and 2 becomes 3, right? It's 1 and 1. It's supposed to be a 3, not 2, right? Because 2 you can separate them. But the most one of the 5 basic elements that I know about in merger acquisitions is to be clear on the vision. Because if there's no alignment on the vision, because these are basically 2 different visions that have been aligned, and there's a vision for marketing, a vision for sales, and so we found companies that we ask all the people, what is the vision of the company? And we got 6 different visions. Oh, what's happening? Guys, it cannot be done in a merger. It must have a clear vision, not complex. So when a company is usually like acquired, it's important for the executive team to be clear on the vision and how the organization will operate. What are the goals of the company? What are the key values? What is the strategy for growth? If you don't answer these questions, if the executive cannot answer this, and if each person cannot replicate it in the company, then you will fail. The second thing I believe, besides of clear vision, we need people who are team players. When you merge companies, it's about team. You need team players because it's a new merger. It's people from different generations, from different companies, from different approaches, from different markets, from different approach on how to behave to customers, right? If you have like good team players in the company, and you have to take care that each one of the people will be a good team player, then you can ensure the smooth transition, okay? So you can move gracefully as possible. The third thing is to be, I would say, accountable to yourself. Let's say you stay in the company, you were not fired in the acquisition, or you didn't leave the acquisition. To be accountable for your own performance, results, and behaviors is a must, because the company is at least 50% in chaos right now. A merger is a chaos. And when it's a chaos, even though you can try to systemize it as much as you can, with the big 4, it's still a chaos, right? Because you mix people. Yeah. So we did not want to get married, right? So when you have this kind of people who are really accountable for their own performance, their own results, their own behaviors, okay? And because look, there's a new boss now. Whether that's an individual or a group who becomes the new boss, okay? It's time to adapt to new environment by playing the new rules, right? And then you have to be accountable to your team. And then you have to be accountable to your company. There are 3 levels of accountability, right? Because for your team, it's to understand, let's say your management team, how it is accountable for the team to the performance and results and behaviors, okay? And what will ensure smooth transition? Again, it's the smooth transition that is the problem. And then if you go for the level of, let's say, the accountability of your company, it's the same. It's performance, it's results, it's behaviors. And to adapt to the environment is playing by new rules, to be proactive, to take risks if you want to drive change, because you have to drive a lot of change, because on the macro level, there are so many things to change. It's not just the big one. A lot of innovation, and you must be, I would say, willing to give and to be proactive, to take risks, to give, to be giver, okay, in order to give a lot of feedback to the system, to others, in order to build a cohesive, I would say, team in the system. That's how I see it. And that's before going outside for help, for consulting firm, coaching firms, and so on.
Yeah.
That's before that.
Agreed.
That's how I see it. I don't know.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Sorry, Lee, go ahead.
No, I'm dying here because we only have 5 minutes left and we have some great questions coming in, and Chris and Opher really enjoying the dialogue between the two of you and the energy around this. Maybe what I'll suggest, because we do have just a short period of time, I'll ask one more question and ask you, Opher, to include your closing remarks in that. And then we'll turn it over to you, Chris, for a few closing words. And
Sure.
that'll bring us to the top of the hour. So Opher, here's the question that is addressed to you. With regard to the Slack example, how would Impro.AI be able to build trust among the various employees and stakeholders? I think you touched on some of the high-level things that could be assessed, like individual level decision models, errors, etc. But I'm curious to know what specific data points and outcomes that could be tracked from a human and business standpoint to facilitate that success.
It's complex to do it in 22 seconds. I would say this. Okay, I will say this. Look, if I would go into the model of analyzing, okay, the possibilities and the performance and the operations, okay, understanding the customer, the supplier, the competitors, all the stuff. Let's say we understand it as a supporting system, to the executive team or to the people. The analysis will give me a better evaluation of the two companies being merged. First of all, like where they are leading themselves to. But through micro coaching every day or micro mentoring every day, basically, if I was in there, I would discuss the goals in between them, the goals of the company, of the new merger, the objectives, the tactics, the context, the perspectives. I think through micro coaching, you can lead to those discussions internally, what to ask, how to ask, where to go, what to understand, how to figure out. So each person will have a deeper understanding of the merger. Because when you don't have a deeper understanding, you're in the dark. When you're in the dark, you don't know what your behavior as a person, as an employee, will be in the company. And so, my sake of, from my view, I would say, in the case of, let's say, Slack and Salesforce, if I would have gone through the understanding of both companies' objectives and market position, okay, and then I could identify potential issues prior to closing the deal, even before the deal, to understand the two companies. And additionally, I could have used like data analytics and micro coaching techniques to help me, to help the two organizations at the same time before the alignment, before they merge, in order to better align the cultures, to understand the culture of each person and each team and the company. And if I would have understood the company 6 months before the merger, we're doing this with a couple of companies today, by the way, but to look at the culture of this company, to look at the objective of this company, to look at the strategies, to look at the other company, and to look within the merger of the new vision, okay, then probably I could have reduced the risk of the M&A failure or whatever it is. And I would able to basically to raise the performance and to deal with the conflicts before they arise. So look, if the company got to the point that there's no trust in the company, it's not only the trust of one CEO versus the other CEO. There's probably no trust between a lot of people in between the two companies, which were supposed to be already after, 2 years together. I don't know, since they were supposed to be a happy family. I mean, they're residing at this one place together, one vision. Each one of them is building his own power. How come? Look, when there's no trust between mother and father, I am sure there will not be trust between the kids, unless their trust is between them against the parents, right? So I think if you take any organization, and you understand the data point in the data points, that there's mistrust in the system. It's just a matter of time that it will go up the scale to the CEO, and the CEO will say, "My organization does not trust you. It's not only me." And in this case, with Slack, we know that the two leaders, the two CEOs, don't trust each other. This is what we know from the media, from the research, and what we have. I've never been inside, but it also for sure there's distrust inside. Let's say I admire my boss, Chris Terris, and Chris does not trust one of the mergers. I will follow Chris, so I will not trust the people in this company, the other company we've merged to, right? So for me, before a merger, try to really understand every aspect on a pixel level on both companies for long enough before you start to merge one by one, piece by piece, like a puzzle with 1,000 pieces that must be aligned to become a good picture and clear picture for the CEOs to move with trust over whatever.
Opher, you have the best metaphors. Chris, anything to wrap us up before we leave today?
I don't know if I can top Opher's metaphors, but look, I mean, we talked a lot about the data required when you kind of go into a merger acquisition. We talked about aligning cultures. We talked about behaviors in the business. And look, I think everyone that's involved in trying to go through building a business through mergers and acquisitions is looking for all the tools that they can find to get better insight and ability to kind of manage what is unseen. So like, look, for me, just on the TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods, we're excited about the work that we're doing with Impro right now. We think that you guys have a unique ability to kind of take it down to that level for us. And when you're going through making big bets like TELUS Agriculture and Consumer Goods is, having all the tools that you can at your disposal is really important. So like for me, I appreciate the chance to be here, talk a little bit about my experience, good and bad. And I've enjoyed working with the Impro team on getting more insight into the 13 companies and cultures that we're trying to bring together. So I just want to say thank you for that.
And thank you. And Chris, if people wanted to get in touch with you, would LinkedIn be the best way to find you?
It is, yeah. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not on any other social media, but I'm on LinkedIn, so you can find me there.
Great, and the same is true for Opher. So wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. And if you enjoyed this webinar, reach out to us at Impro.AI, and we'd love to hear more of your questions. There were a lot we didn't get to today, and I apologize for that. But we want to hear what's on the horizon for you and your business, and how AI and micro coaching might support that. And we hope to see you on our next webinar. Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks all. Thanks all.
Thank you, Lee.